Welcome to the SaaS AdLab podcast, where we bring to you the stories of SaaS founders, entrepreneurs, and CEOs. My name is Luis. I'm the founder of Fantôm Agency, a digital marketing agency specializing in scaling SaaS companies. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Karl. He is the founder and president over at Tenon. Thank you so much again, Karl, for being on today. It's a pleasure having you. And to start off, why don't you just kick us off with, a little bit of background on you, how you got in this space, and essentially what it took to build Tenon.
Okay, yeah. So I started my career as a web developer and then transitioned into a role doing web accessibility consulting here in the DC area, right around the time Section 508 came out, and I really latched onto the whole accessibility thing. Fast forward a while, and I started the side project, played around with it for a while, and eventually I said, you know what, I'm going to make a product out of it. So my product Tenon is a web accessibility testing tool. It is the first API first accessibility testing product out there. And the reason why I went with the API first approach was because I wanted to make something that was fully integrated with developers' tool sets, developer and DevOps and QA automation. So the idea behind the tool is you plug it into your IDE, your task runners, your automated build systems, your CI/CD, all that sort of stuff, instead of having to go out to a completely separate product. And it's worked out well so far.
Good. And how long has Tenon been around for?
So we went into a private beta phase in 2014, and since that time we've fast forwarded up to 2016 is when I turned it into a full-time job.
Very cool. And how long, or not how long, but essentially how many customers do you have at the moment?
How many customers? That's a great question. So we have, I think we're getting ready to cross 200 customers. And when I say 200, that doesn't sound like a lot for a SaaS company, but a lot of our sales are group sales or large enterprise sales. A lot of customers have their own private instances. There's over 11,000 users of Tenon.
Yeah, so I did notice that you have on your website the big brands that trust you and stuff like that. So with talking a little bit more about that, like obviously like some of the people that listen are both, big B2B players, so that like they're selling their software to enterprise as well. So
Yeah.
What is the approach for Tenon and yourself and everyone in the team to find, that sort of company? Like, do you have SDRs working, or is it all sales calls, or how does a typical sales cycle go for you?
It's, I got to tell you, it's really awesome because the vast majority of our sales are completely word of mouth driven. They're all inbound, especially those enterprise sales. They're almost all inbound sales. And they come to us primarily because maybe they're looking for something. They see that we offer SaaS, and then they also see that we offer, the enterprise installations and stuff like that. And they go, well, based on the flexibility of it, they give us a call. And it's almost all completely inbound, and we hardly do any like CPC or anything like that. Most of our stuff is content marketing, personal appearances by me at conferences and stuff like that is where we get most of our work.
Sweet. Now, as far as this inbound customers that you get, or all the leads that are coming in, are these people aware of the issue that they have? Do they want to learn more about the solution, or where are they at as far as like how ready are these people to actually become a customer? Like, how much education do you have to provide to them to get them to actually close?
We don't have to do a whole lot of selling around why accessibility is important. That's kind of good, kind of bad. Part of it is because there's a lot of accessibility lawsuits out there. So it's top of mind, especially for financial, insurance, healthcare, education, and retail. Those are the big segments that we operate in for the most part for these large customers. And so it's already kind of a top of mind thing. The only education that we really have to do is in terms of selling our approach, in terms of selling them on the things that do make us different than some of the other older players in the space. Other than that, they're pretty much on board ahead of time.
And you said that you don't spend a lot on like PPC advertising or anything like that. Is there a specific reason for that? Do you think that maybe your essentially your perfect client, your dream client isn't I guess persuaded by something like that, or what is the reason behind that?
So a lot of our stuff is, so the PPC, CPC stuff that we do is extremely targeted. So we're going to target those people from LinkedIn. We're going to target them through remarketing. We're going to spend a lot for the conversion, but it's so targeted that we're not just blasting it out there, because it really is kind of a niche product still.
Right.
Despite the fact that there's a lot of litigation around this stuff, it's still very niche. And what we want to do is have a laser-like focus on the specific client that we're looking for. And so, our total spend is not much at all compared to what I think other people are spending.
Very cool. What is the biggest challenge as far as, and this is from the beginning, right? Like as an entrepreneur, as a founder, what's like the single biggest challenge that you faced throughout the entire process?
I think the biggest challenge has been one that has gradually become more and more present as we've gone on. When we entered the market, there was literally, and we're fully bootstrapped 100%. I borrowed 10 grand from a friend early on in that 2016 phase to finish some dev work.
Hmm.
Every single thing else has been bootstrapped. And so I'm proud of that. And we've made a fair amount of money, and we're not beholden to anybody else. But one of the other problems that gives us is that we don't have the massive funding to be able to afford a huge development team. So the head start that we had on the things that we were doing, that led us ahead of everybody out of the gate. Keeping that momentum has been a bit of a challenge in terms of the bigger players who had more developers, had more cash in their war chest, so to speak, had been able to catch up a little bit.
Right.
So for us to keep innovating on what we're doing, it takes a little bit longer than I think it otherwise could.
Would that then be, I mean, it almost seems like a setback at the same time, right? So like you said, it's a challenge definitely. Does that mean that you would be open to VC funding, or you don't think it's like, you prefer to keep it bootstrapped? I mean, there's obviously pros and cons to both sides.
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest challenge or the biggest question on VC funding would be whether it's a match. In other words, I just don't want somebody to hand me money and then not be on board with
Right.
the philosophy, the spirit of the company, the things that we're trying to accomplish as a company. If somebody's just like, oh, I'm going to send them this money and I'm going to get a 5x out of it, and woo, you know what, I'm cool. Like I'm already making good money, my people are well fed, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm not trying to conquer the world. If a VC came along and said, hey, we are 100% on with the vision, and the group of us are going to conquer the planet, then I'm all in.
So like you would like for them to be just as invested as you in actually producing a product and not just a return.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Obviously, I mean, everybody wants to make money, and I sure as hell want to make money
Right.
too. But it's got to be part of the vision. The money has to be tied to the vision and stuff like that.
How many employees do you currently have?
So we have about 14.
Okay. And is there a specific thing that you look for? I mean, do you pay attention to culture and things like that?
Yeah, I pay a ton of attention to culture. What we do in terms of hiring is we actually have every single person who exists on staff now has veto power on anybody who comes in. So
Mm.
the first step, of course, is getting past our HR person and satisfying her to as to whether she sees that person is a fit, and then we go from there, review them, and I have a couple of my senior people do the interviews, and then they get to interview. Everybody in the company interviews that person as well in one way or another, or at least reviews past interview comments and stuff. And it largely is two things. Like, first off, do we think the person can do the job? That's kind of obvious. You don't want to hire somebody who's not going to do the job. And then, is that person going to be a good fit?
Right.
Are they going to be? Are they going to contribute to the overall atmosphere of the company and attitude of the company?
Very cool. If you could have one thing for Tenon, like you could literally choose just one thing, whatever it is, to accomplish within the next year, what would that be?
One of the things I would love to be able to do is have more integrations of our product into other products. That's been a focus for us for a while now. Sometimes other things have to take precedent because we are working on some big initiatives right now. But being able to integrate it into more things, what I really want for people is to be able to just plop Tenon into exactly what they're already doing because there's an integration built and get started immediately. I think that's my biggest goal for people and
Would
for
that
myself.
be an option to do something like that with something like Zapier or Integromat?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. A Zapier kind of thing, automate.io, or whatever, that kind of flexibility to just boop, boop, and then these two things are talking to each other is would be phenomenal.
What is, I guess, what is the the what's stopping you from doing such a thing?
Because we have a lot of other initiatives that we're working on right now that are a lot more of a heavier lift. Right now, we're completely rewriting the API to add a lot more power and flexibility. We're also adding some capabilities that are more robust around organizations and teaming. So being able to collaborate with others in the testing process. And then the other thing we're doing is making improvements to the spidering capability, because part of the tool is a spider and it can actually crawl through all of the pages of your site and test every single page. We need to make some improvements to how that is in terms of being able to better target parts of the site that you want to test. So those kinds of things, and given the limited team size, they're kind of in the way of creating these integrations.
What is, if you could change one thing as far as like your marketing goes, what would that be? Like, would you be able, would you have a team that can put out more content to kind of educate a little bit more, maybe like video, like what would that one piece that you think would kind of push you to the next level would be?
I think content and video would be great. One of the things that helps Tenon specifically in terms of, first off, our initial launch and also continuing on is my personal reputation in the space.
Hmm.
Because prior to even creating Tenon, I had published a couple hundred blog posts on the topic of accessibility anyway.
Hmm.
And I believe that knowledge share is a huge benefit for us specifically, because it demonstrates to the potential customer, yeah, these people really know what they're talking
Right,
about.
exactly.
So content marketing and knowledge share, and not just the written stuff with blog posts, but videos would be a great add-on to the
Yeah.
marketing.
What about distribution channels? Right. So like for all your content, is there any specific thing that maybe like someone in your team or even you are doing to get that content out and obviously to the right people? Because like you mentioned, like you have a very specific niche. So even if you were to use like Facebook ads or LinkedIn ads to blast, like you still can't target like that one person that is going to look at that and have that aha moment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of the stuff that we're doing now, we used to have all of our CRM and sales and marketing stuff sort of on all these disparate different services, and we've unified around HubSpot very recently. As a matter of fact, we're still doing the onboarding process with them, but I'm really looking forward to be able to having a unified location for all of our marketing stuff and all of our advertising stuff within HubSpot, and the ability for us to to track a lot of those things and to distribute those to the various different channels.
Totally.
Because I think what you were alluding to is there's some people who choose to consume content in different ways. Some
Right,
people,
right.
they still want RSS feeds.
Hmm.
Other people like blogs. Other people like mailing lists. So being able to unify that is I think a big deal.
Yeah. 100%. And like he's like, essentially you could repurpose everything, right? So like
Yeah.
you have a blog post and then you have literally or the other way around. Let's say you're at a conference because you said you go to conferences
Yeah.
and you're giving a talk on something specific, and then somebody on your team transcribes that, puts it into, a blog post, and then maybe you send it out in an email list too. So the cool thing is that you can literally take one piece of content and just distribute it
Yeah.
throughout every channel that you want. So I see what you're saying there. Now to talk a little bit more about like the personal aspect of growing the business, what is the most challenging thing, on a personal level? While is it like, I guess, the stress that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis growing a business, or what sort of thing is like the one thing that kind of like bogs you down?
Well, I mean, I think I have two things in response to that. I think one of them is the fact that that I am now not just responsible for feeding myself. I'm
Right.
responsible for feeding 14 other people and their families too. And so, ensuring the success of the company isn't just ensuring my own success. It's ensuring that they can continue to be successful people too, and pay the bills and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And then the much more personal thing is balance. I'm older than most founders. I'm 45. So a lot of founders are, younger kids or something like that. And working 80 hours a week is awesome. And I did that stuff, like when I first started out as a web developer, woo, I'd work all the way clear into like 3 a.m. I'd be writing code
Right.
and stuff like that. Well, and I can still do that, but I realized that there's a point where I'm like, nah, like I'm not going to be one of those founders who are going to be like, I'm going to work myself to death. And the only reason you're not successful is because you're not working hard enough. No, I still work 10 to 12 hours a day,
Right.
but my weekends are mine. You know what I mean? Like and that balance was something that I had to choose to find and really force myself into.
Right. And obviously spending time with family, like giving them, priority as well, and all those good things essentially. I think that's one thing that a lot of people struggle. And like you said, like a lot of the founders nowadays, like they're, younger people that are essentially, trying to come up with cutting edge technology and things like that. And they will be there sitting, till like late hours in the morning. But it's just not sustainable regardless of what they're taking or whatever. Like, so
Uh,
I think it comes with that, like kind of like self-care mentality that you should also look after like the other aspects of your life and make sure that everything revolves in a holistic way.
And you know what people don't realize too is that if you keep going in that mode, you're going to get burnt out. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious.
Exactly.
But another thing that I found was that my general life satisfaction improved when I made this switch. It improved to a point where I was actually more productive. In other words, those hours that I put in each day were the best hours. There's times when you're working, 15, 16 hours a day, and the only time you take time off is to eat your breakfast or something. When you're doing that, what ends up happening is so many of those hours are just non-productive
Hmm.
that it's not worth it. It really isn't. Kick ass for your 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever it's going to be. Kick ass on those, and then take some time off.
Totally refresh and take it all in, learn new stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
totally. In this entire time, what would you say is or has been your biggest mistake as a founder?
Wow, I've made I've made a few.
But the
There's
one, like you mentioned something good earlier, and I think that was a responsibility, right?
mm,
So making sure that you're not just you anymore, but your team is also well
yeah.
off, and obviously they're getting what they deserve for the work that they're putting in. But it like, has there ever been a time where you did something and you were literally scared that something was going to happen where your team could have been affected as well?
I actually had something where the team was affected. So there was a time period not too long ago, but about a year, 18 months ago, where we were just burning white hot. I mean, we were carrying 250K in accounts receivables every single month.
Hmm.
It was at any given time, I'd look in QuickBooks and see that there were still outstanding receipts for 250K and just killing it. And what ended up happening was I was like, okay, I'm going to sink a whole bunch of money into bringing on some additional development work and all this sort of stuff to really ramp up the velocity.
Hmm.
And what I hadn't realized was the complete other swing side of the pendulum from holidays and all that sort of stuff, where the bottom sort of fell out of this and ended up having all this money that I had spent out of my own, out of the war chest that we had saved up and all this other stuff, that made it a point where I had problems paying people on the team. And that was really bad. It taught me a big lesson about just because you have it, it doesn't mean you're going to have it forever. You know what I mean? It doesn't. You gotta actually consider the fact that even when you're going good, the pendulum can swing the other way, and you have to be prepared for it.
Totally. Good lesson for sure.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like sometimes things just go so well, and then it just hits you, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta make sure
Yeah.
that you're set up for success, I guess, when that does happen, because it probably will be at some point.
Yeah. It's
Um,
got to. And now I've learned that lesson so well that now it was good that it happened. It
right.
sucked when it happened. It was good that it happened because I learned something huge out of it.
Totally. Um, what's something you're not very good at?
What's something that I'm not a startup guy. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel like I fit into that very well because like people every time I hear people talking about startups and stuff like that, it's always about mergers and acquisitions and funding and VCs and angels and I've I don't even know what any of that stuff is
Uh,
for the most part. It's just been execute, and that's one thing I've never been really good at is sort of fitting into that whole scene of the startup world, I guess.
cool. We're getting close to the end of the podcast here, but a couple more questions. What is your biggest accomplishment?
The biggest accomplishment is that we completely revolutionized the way web accessibility testing is done.
Mhm.
Absolutely, without a doubt, nobody was doing what we were doing when we did it, and now they're all doing it.
Yeah.
And quite simply, it's because of how much it makes sense. Prior to when Tenon came out, there were these big, I call them monolithic accessibility testing platforms that were out there, and they tried to be all and end all in terms of the reporting and all this sort of stuff, and the developers and the QA people had to go to this separate system, and for us, it was like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
If you ask a developer where they want their tools, it's going to be in where their other tools are. You know what I mean? Like even me as a developer, when I'm writing code, the only thing that's open is my IDE. That's it, and that's where I expect everything to be.
Mhm.
That's why things like Grunt and Gulp and all that sort of stuff came out in the first place, was because it was all about making these tasks more convenient for the developer.
Right.
And I think everybody was like, yeah, no shit, that makes total sense. And I apologize for cussing on
You're
your
good.
podcast.
You're good.
But then now, next thing you know, the other bigger companies that were out there in the space started imitating it, and I think that's awesome.
That's
I
good.
see one of the things I saw. I have read. I have periodically read the start of Reddit, and you'll see somebody go, "Oh, there's a person up there copying what I did," and oh, what am I going to do? Dude, pat yourself on the back, because if
Yeah.
they're imitating you, you have done something huge.
Totally. They're just essentially, what's the word? I just blanked. But they're just, I literally just blanked. I forgot.
Yeah.
They're I guess qualifying or
Yeah, exactly.
validating the idea. That's what I
They're
meant.
validating the idea.
Totally.
Exactly.
Very cool. What is one software company that you think right now is just absolutely killing it and you look up to it?
I already mentioned HubSpot, so I'm not going to mention them again. The other one is Stripe.
Okay.
So when we first started, and we decided we were going to go for the subscription model for some of the smaller customers, I was looking around and I was looking at everybody, Rick Curley and ChargeBee and all that sort of stuff, and I came across Stripe, and Stripe was very new at the time, and their API is amazing. Their API is the kind of thing, it just makes sense.
Mhm.
As for us, because we are an accessibility company, everything we do has to be accessible too. So a lot of these other payment processors were like, oh, use our form or whatever. And Stripe's own form, unfortunately, that was inaccessible, but the API allowed us to plug that in. And as Stripe has grown and as their API has improved, everything has just been amazing. And
Yeah.
I think that's a model. That's a model to follow.
Cool. Awesome. And a couple last questions here. Where can people find you online, Karl?
So the company, Tenon.io, Tenon.io. That's the company. You can follow me on Twitter at Karl Groves. It's Karl with a K. My blog, Karl Groves. My LinkedIn, Karl Groves. Karl Groves is everything. That's where to find me. If you follow me on Twitter, it's mostly politics. If you want the geeky stuff, you'll have to sift through it a little bit. But my blog, karlgroves.com, has very little politics, all geeky stuff.
Awesome.
And then the Tenon website, like I mentioned.
Sweet. Perfect. And last question. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah. So tell me about your podcast. I think it's amazing. And you talked very fast at the very beginning. How many of these do you do?
Thank you. So I try to do one every week.
Mm-hmm.
This week or these past couple of weeks, I've actually done, I think, like 5 every week. So about one every day. Very fun. I do, for some reason, I'm not sure what it is at the beginning. Like it just has to get out, you know?
Uh-huh.
Because I know I've heard that from people before, and the beginning is really fast, and then I start to like kind of slow down for
Yeah,
whatever.
and you get into the groove and you're ready
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah. So that's that. But the podcast really, like, I fell in love with software companies and just everything that they were doing. To be honest, at the very beginning, the one thing that kind of attracted me was the design. Like, for some reason, every single software company that I came across had really beautiful websites.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what, like, the first thing that kind of like caught my eye. And then after that, it was obviously like, the things that people were doing in this space, like amazing entrepreneurs, pretty much all the way around. Very young, like you said, as well. So just kind of like looking up to that. I've always been very entrepreneurial as well, so it just resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then while I got into this space, obviously I've been advertising for a while now, and advertising for software companies. It's just something I really enjoyed, and I wanted to get in front of more software people. So I started like thinking, and what can I do to start talking to more founders? How can I get in front of them? And I figured, let's put a podcast, let them tell their story, what they're doing, and then essentially create a relationship with them,
Yeah.
and just get myself out there. So that's kind of
Awesome.
like the backstory on that.
Cool. Well,
Yeah,
awesome. Thank you.
very cool. So thank you again, Karl, for being on here. Again, it was a pleasure. It's really cool what you've been able to do with Tenon, the things that you've learned, and obviously the lessons that you now have passed on to the audience. So appreciate that, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.